Welcome back to Continuing the Conversation, where we bring you authentic AI insights that you can actually use. I'm your host, Chelene Martin, AI enthusiast, business strategist, and co-founder of Revenue Pulse Advisors. I work with individuals and companies to unlock practical, powerful ways to use AI in both life and business. Here's something I've noticed lately in my own work with clients. The ones who get the most value from AI aren't the ones obsessing on how to automate everything. They're the ones rethinking their entire approach to the problem. And funny enough, the most AI productive person I know, Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ, never talks about automation, ever. That got me thinking, what does that say about how we're wired to think? And what might we be missing? Rob, welcome back. So, Rob, I've been working with CharmIQ for 2 years now. And it just hit me recently that you have never, ever talked about automation. Everyone else in AI is obsessed with automating this task, automating that workflow, automating everything, really. But your platform doesn't even suggest automated tasks. From a revenue perspective and growth, when I think about this, I've seen companies automate bad processes and end up scaling inefficiently. So when I realized that you never lead with automation, I have to ask, is this obsession with automation actually slowing us down? What are your thoughts?
This has been a topic on the back of my mind for the longest time. It's such an interesting notion when everyone's pointed in one way and you're pointed another. And I think of it very much like the salmon swimming upstream kind of a thing here.
Yes.
So this one is really fascinating in that, as you said, I don't really ever talk about automation, and I constantly hear people talking about basically everything you hear about AI is just about task automation.
Yep.
And everyone that I talk to initially, they're always asking the question about like, hey, can I automate this task? How do I do this? Like, as we've mentioned in 1,000 podcasts now, it's a lot of folks are transactional in their approach to AI. So what's the difference here? Like, and this one, I really want to deep dive into how my thinking on this works. And as a result, like, how did CharmIQ come to be, and is it as it is? And then talk about how other folks talk about this stuff. So interesting is when I started CharmIQ, the first charm that I made, the first set of prompts that I made were all about how do I think through a problem. So I specifically created a methodology charm that would help me think through problems. And what's funny about that is I've never bumped into anyone else who's done that before. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, everyone who I give my methodology charm to, they love it. They love the ability to think through problems in different ways than they've thought about. Let me take this a different angle. If I look back at my career, if I look back at the things that I've done, I've always focused on the problem as a whole rather than the set of tasks that we do within that problem. I look at it, if I'm given a bunch of things to do, I'm always thinking about, well, how do I make this whole thing more efficient? Not how do I do each individual task more efficiently, but can I get rid of those tasks? Is there a way in which that it didn't even need to be done to begin with? So we're going to talk a lot about this throughout this whole one, but we're going to talk more about, and sometimes this may seem cliched and whatnot, is talking about like the bigger picture. Like, where do these processes fit into things? And is it better to think in terms of systems or in terms of tasks and processes?
Yeah, I think we're going to dive into this one pretty deeply, especially for the audience, because I think a lot of us are very task oriented. And so I want to run through a little fun experiment real quick before we just keep diving in. So let's run through an experiment. Imagine you could sit down with Einstein for an hour. Right? Our audience. Imagine that. Most people would hand them their inbox and say, can you help me prioritize my emails? And in business, I've seen this happen all the time. A client wants to automate a follow-up sequence or a CRM workflow. And my first question is, why do we even have this sequence in the first place? What's the root of the problem? And I really learned that from engaging with AI through CharmIQ, specifically your methodology agent who I use regularly. So Rob, what would Einstein actually say to that request if I would request it or someone from the audience? What do you think he would say?
That's a great question, because I think this isn't far off the mark. When you bring in consultants, when you bring in your next hire, as you get smart people into your org to like think through problems. And again, that's usually why you bring in consultants. And that's kind of what we're getting at here with this Einstein analogy is you typically don't bring in people to think about like individual tasks. Most people would be like, why do you have that task? So if you gave Einstein, can you imagine like sitting down with Einstein and being like, I have 1,000 emails in my inbox that I have to do. He'd first say like, what the heck's an inbox? But once you got through all of that stuff, the first thing he wouldn't do is go into an email and say, well, we can automate this email. He'd be like, why do you have so many? Like, why are they all there? And I would say with my experience with consultants, in my experience in being a consultant that goes into organization, those are usually my questions as I sit down with people is, because they come to you with the tasks, right? Because that's what you have in front of you in a day is like, I have this massive inbox. I have this thing I have to do. I have these things to take care of. And again, the first question that I always ask is why? Like, where does this fit? Like, who sends you these? What happens to them when they go on the other side? Do they come back after they're done and so forth? So what I hope that we're trying to get across here and what I hope's coming across here is that it's really easy to get blindsided. So tunnel vision with the task that's involved. But it's sometimes really a good idea to say, should this task be in part of that process? And as we talk through, I'm going to constantly say this is going to be my new thing. It used to always be the Einstein and the phone problem. And I'm going to constantly use this new thing, which is it's called artificial intelligence. Like it's literally in the name of it. It's not called artificial automation. It's not called artificial tools. It's called artificial intelligence. And it's bizarre because we really don't talk about intelligence. There's no set of discussions that you see online that are like, what is the intelligence in artificial intelligence? Everything immediately devolves into like, how did it do on this task? How does it perform in these benchmarks? Like, what does that mean? And I would just say we don't really understand each other when we talk about intelligence. So what's interesting about this is if you bring in intelligence in a case, so forget about AI for a moment, and you bring in somebody like Einstein, you bring in some smart consultants or something, and you let them look at your inbox. Again, the first thing they're going to say, they're going to ask the system question. They're going to say, where does this fit in? How does this work? Where do the pieces fit? Rather than like, let's look at this task and automate it.
Yeah.
And we can bring this across the board. We'll go through examples throughout all these things. But Chelene, you mentioned one, which is about inboxes and through workflows and automations around CRM and closing tickets and like those kind of things. And we'll go through more, some examples like, again, customer service and things like that. But again, the thing to think about is where does the task fit within a larger picture?
I think, and you hit on one that I hear all the time in my work with customers. And I see it a lot in the AI communities. I see it a lot in the AI, events that I go to. Everyone's always saying, focusing on that automation. And I see it consistently. Someone says, let's use customer service because that's super easy because probably everyone in the audience can really identify with that. We get too many customer service requests. We need a chatbot, right? Chatbots they still are the big thing. You think AI, you think chatbot, but that's not here nor there. But so on the surface, it sounds logical, right? Like we watch, I've watched companies spend 6 figures on a bot thinking it would fix customer service headaches only to see churn actually go up because the real problem wasn't the speed, it was the clarity. And Rob, you approach this completely differently. I've seen you in action. So if a client came to you or a customer came to you and said, chatbot, I have 6 figures, I need to solve this customer service kind of headache, how would you approach this?
That's a great question. And again, what I hope that the common theme that you're seeing here is think about that customer service requests and they're coming in. Think about it from a system perspective. Why are they coming in? I was talking with a friend the other day. They do a lot of things like t-shirt sales and things like that. And they actually do them overseas. So use products from the US and sell them overseas. And what's interesting, like the number one set of requests that they get is people want to know, because an American size is very different than a European size or an Asian size and things like that. They just simply want to know, will it fit? So one of the obvious things to do there is in your product description, make it very clear that this product is, you can state the size in terms of the demographic and the people that you're looking for. So rather than saying it's an American medium or an American small, you can use a local size. And again, this is the question of, rather than just simply saying, oh, we need a chatbot that'll answer that question for us. Again, especially if you have a number of questions that are asked in the exact same way, it may just be that you need to look at the beginning of the process that's causing that to happen, whether that's sizing, which is super common, availability. Sometimes these things are, I know it may seem like we're giving a flippant answer. It's just like, oh, fix the product description. Again, the notion of having intelligence at your disposal is that you can start to feed in some of the constraints that you have. It's like, and then you can start to think through those problems, right? So maybe the problem is that it's really hard in your system to change how it is that you specify these things. And maybe that's, rather than automating the task away, like spend the time and energy to try to figure out how to make that system easier to work with. Or I know that inventory is always a common problem, and it's sometimes hard for people to have real-time inventory ability. But again, if you look at how much money is spent on the support side trying to deal with these inventory requests, maybe the time and money should be spent there. And I know we'll talk about this in a moment, but what's interesting is, as you start to spend money on these smaller tasks, you lose the ability to understand how much is being spent on the process overall. So as we start to automate these pieces away, they're not free to automate those things. So again, we should look at this thing holistically. And again, what's amazing about having artificial intelligence, in other words, intelligence on tap, is that you can start to put these questions into the system. And again, if there's a single way that I spend my time, rather than trying to solve this task, is say, I have these tasks. What can I do to prevent me from having to have all of these tasks? Right. How do I put myself at a point where my value that I'm bringing is maximized, right? So if my value is not maximized by going through 1,000 emails and answering them, my value is going in and saying, okay, well, how and why do we have those 1,000 emails? And more importantly, if we answered those 1,000 emails, have we just shifted everything downstream? Like, does that actually help the customer or not?
Yeah. I think there's like fundamentally differences, like way people approach problems, right? There's like the person, I know these people. I used to actually really be one of them before I started engaging with artificial intelligence. I loved checking boxes, right? I loved like getting shit done was my jam. I love to get shit done. But engaging with AI and building relationships with AI really helped me take a step back and really look at the larger picture. So it sounds like fundamentally different ways people approach problems are significant. And in sales leadership, clients that I work with, I've seen the same thing. Some leaders react to every deal like it's unique, while others spot patterns across deals that reveal like symptomatic opportunities or risks. So I know, Rob, you can break down these different thinking styles. You see them in people, and you can identify them really quickly, and it's great. It's a unique gift. And is this something people can learn, or is it just how different brain works and we're kind of stuck with it?
Bunch of great questions there. So we've been primarily talking about two types of thinking, whether you're talking about the system as a whole or whether you're thinking about the task, the individual parts. And what I want to really emphasize here is that there's not, it tends to be cultural. It tends to be what you learn that you fit into one of those buckets, whether you're a system thinker or whether you're a task thinker.
Yes.
A lot of us are honestly just hired into task-based roles, and therefore our life kind of becomes that. And just like we get that endorphin hit on our phones as we cycle through things or we play games and like get and win, we very much get that endorphin hit when we check off tasks on our list. And that's great. Like, again, especially if we're in a role that is task-based, to be able to check things off of our list is fantastic.
Yes.
But again, as we're all in this weird place now where, again, if you really kind of read the tea leaves, given how much people are asking for tasks to be automated, you bet your dollar that the fact that all of the vendors are super hyper focused on delivering automatable solutions. So I guess what I'm trying to call out here, it should be almost blatantly obvious at this point, is we're in a world where we're task driven. We want to automate those tasks, but and we hear lots of people talking about, well, what does that mean towards jobs? And like, I think it's kind of obvious what it means is we need to move further upstream, right? So instead of having these automatable tasks, which are just going to go away, let me even change this another way. What if every single one of your kind of task-based work that you did in a day was gone? Like, what would that do to your day? Would that free up time to do other things? Are there more valuable things defined in your roles, in your life, or whatever that can just be checked off if those things are taken care of? And that's where we all need to start thinking. And again, my belief is again that those things are going to be more those system style thinkings. Like, where can you apply thinking into a problem?
Yes.
And what's really fascinating is it's really hard to automate away the system style problems, because you need a lot of context, you need a lot of visibility, a lot of insight. Like, the information doesn't exist at that level. You need humans, which again, I'll always kind of fall back on consultants, not to say that I like or don't like them, but it's a common role that whenever you have like too many tasks and too many things, you tend to bring in process people, and those process people think it through. And again, think about that for a moment. Like, why is it that you just don't bring in another task doer and plug them in? Like, you bring in people who think more broadly about these things. You know, you look for root causes in problems. You look for like patterns and things that are systemic that can be like, oh, if I can solve these 7 problems if I just solve this one problem.
Yes.
And again, so what I hope that you're hearing in all this is, one, again, we're not trying to say that task-based jobs are bad by any stretch of the imagination. They tend to be what lots of companies produce. I don't know whether people find this a bad term or not, but a lot of jobs are simply gap fillers. And what I mean by that is there's this overarching process, and there's things that you can do easily, and there are things that aren't, that you just basically need a human to go in there and apply small bits of intelligence to do these things. These tend to be those tasks that people want to automate because we're not particularly good at them. We're not good at doing the same task over and over and over again. Those are the things that are designed almost to be automated away. But what does it mean? How do we move further up? That's what I'm trying to get at with all of this notion of system thinking. And again, we're building intelligence. So the point is, and I'm sure Chelene will say it, is that once we will be augmented with the intelligence, whereas with tasks, you tend to be replaced with the tools that come along. So I'll have to find a good set of analogies to work with this. But when you think about it, as my tasks become more thinking tasks, I want more intelligence to surround me because I get so much more benefit from those things. The impact per dollar of intelligence that I get is much larger. Whereas again, when I have automatable tasks, the net value of those things are pretty darn small. So I hope all that made sense. Again, I'm trying to draw lots of analogies so people can kind of like look around, whether it's their work life or their personal life, and kind of look at it and say, am I doing tasks that are just individual tasks that I just like have to check them off? And am I only checking them off because like they're there and it's good when I do that, I get rewarded for those things? Those are the tasks that are going to be automated and things are going to go away, even in weird ways, right? As we get robo taxis and things like that, a lot of these, and my parents, for example, use the delivery service for food a lot. For groceries, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
That was, as they're getting older, it's like harder for them to get to the store. And those are great tasks to like be replaced with machines and whatnot, because again, they're just tasks. They're just things to check off. Like I have to go to the grocery store and buy strawberries because that's just a task I have to do on the list. If I could save that time, I can save the time going to the store and all of that, and I can put that into higher value tasks. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully that makes sense in this large context that we're talking.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you're saying is most people seem naturally drawn to task automation, right? And I think that's why everyone we talk to and in AI groups, it's like all about automating things. Like, when's the robot going to come to my house and raise my kids and teach them to be great humans, right? I think part of the problem is training, right? And what I love about this is what I do in my business, in my everyday, and in my personal relationships. When I talk about AI with people, it's not just the automation of tasks, right? So it's really about retraining us as humans, right, about the opportunity we have in front of us. So, for example, in business development, we reward quick wins and a quota hits, right? So if you hit your quota and you're in sales or you're BD or whatever, you get paid, you get accolades, you ring a gong, whatever it is, right? It reinforces the task of thinking because that's what gets the applause, that's what gets the approval, right? So, but system thinkers, this might not, those people may not be getting the instant celebration, but they're the ones building scalable revenue models, right? They're the true heroes in all of it. And there's two different types of people: those people going out and getting those quick wins, and those people thinking about the larger problem and the larger challenge and building solutions to solve them. So my question to you, Rob, is this just conditioning? Because there's task people and like system people, thinking people. And what happens when AI makes task completion essentially free? Like, so what if we build these amazing robots that come to our house and raise our kids and do our dishes and do all the things? What's the risk there?
Those are great questions. So what's interesting is I think that our education system, and I'll just say that typically our education system is designed to support the industry that we have, right? Like when you look back, like that's how we set up curriculum, is to feed them into the workplace. So I would just say, because there's a lot of task-based work to be done, I would say we tend to really focus our education system on task-based things.
Mm.
We're not. So a friend of mine just recently got their first intern. And I always love this experience. I love to hear from peers and from managers and things like that who've gotten their first intern, because it is such an interesting experience, because you've gotten just far enough along in your career that you kind of forgot what it was like on day zero.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of being reminded of how much you really, really, really didn't know when you first started your job. And what's more is, the first thing that I get out of everybody is people like, why don't they teach kids to think? Like, why is it just are they just trying to get a task done? And I think it's so true, because standardized testing is so much easier to do, and it's standardized, rather than like give people an open-ended set of problems that you have to work through and things like that. It's really hard to grade those things based on like originality and things like that. So going back again to the intern analogy, it's really interesting to see the fact that the kids just like want to do the task, but they don't understand, like, and they don't even ask, like, where does it fit in? Like, why am I doing this thing? And you can see that like in the result, like they completely they may have finished the task, but they may have completely missed the spirit of the task that they did, because they didn't see, and more specifically, when you usually ask the task of somebody, especially of an intern, you don't remember the fact that they don't have this bigger picture of like who your workplace is and what you do and all these other things. So they don't even know what the roles in an organization are, and like, how do you communicate effectively? So again, I think that we, through all the machinations that happen, I think we're just really pop out of school with this really task-based driven thing. And we're just like, I'm going to solve tasks today. I'm just going to get these things that I know how to do, and I'm going to check them off a list, and that's how I get my payment. And again, I don't see how that's going to be much more sustainable in the future. And as you said, what's really crazy is, as the tasks become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, because if there's one thing we're doing right now, is we're driving the cost of intelligence through AI cheap, like it's going down, down, down. And what is that going to mean? And again, going back to what I alluded to earlier, if I had the inbox and I can just solve that with automation, is that good? Right now, typically in an organization, when you have to hire a new person, like I would go to my boss and be like, I can't answer these 1,000 emails in a day. Like I need another person to get do 500, and each of us will do 500. And normally that feedback of them then having to go to their boss and saying like, hey, I need more money for this. And then the other boss is like, well, wait, why do you need so much money to solve these things?
Yes.
Like, why is that costing so much? What's going to be weird is, as all of these tasks start to get automated away, we're going to lose that feedback loop. And I'll admit, this was one of the main reasons I really liked this concept that we're talking through here today, is we're not looking at the downstream impact of this. Like, again, we're designed to be task driven. Like, we would love the more tasks that we get done, like the more we're rewarded. So if I can automate those tasks, I'll get more rewards and all these other things. And again, and maybe the company will automate those away. And again, the problem with that is, just because you're automating those tasks, that feedback cycle of normally adding additional headcount, additional cost, you're not going to see it. So you're not going to be more likely to fix what the process was to begin with, which means overall you're going to be less efficient. And then just to say, when you come in from the other side and you create a new process, so a competitor comes up and they already have the efficiencies of these automations, they're going to start with a much better process because they don't need all of these little pieces that you've put in place. So again, I really encourage people as these think about what it means, not only what happens as we automate these tasks, but again, what does that happens to that feedback?
Yes. So for people listening who recognize themselves as task thinkers, and I'll admit that was me for years, up until about 2 years ago when I was introduced to artificial intelligence and engaging with it on a daily basis, both personally and professionally. What's the first conversation they should have with AI to start rewiring their thinking? And what's the practical roadmap to begin thinking really, Rob, more like you?
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. I don't want to single myself out, but if there's one thing that I constantly try to get people to do is I get them to ask why. Like, why does this task exist? Rather than say to automate it away, I'll just say I've had this throughout my entire career, as I said earlier, but even on like a tactical level, I've had so many times where developers will come to me and they'll have shown me that they automated some task. And I would be like, should we have even done that task? Like, is that task even important? One, it's great that you told me you automated it, but the fact that you had been doing this task for all of this time and it was chewing into the amount of time that you had to do your other work, you should have really mentioned the fact that you had this periodic process every day. Like, why is it there? Is there something else that we can do to get rid of it? And so, be curious. We've said this in so many episodes. We now have, again, intelligence on tap. You can go pull the handle and you can get yourself a nice frothy mug of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage you to not just, or maybe to look across all of the questions that you've asked and instead of giving the machine all of the questions individually and getting an answer, give it all of your questions and just say, like, help me think through what it means that I have these questions. Like, is there some other way for me to think about this problem that I have? And again, I do this on a daily basis. I spend all of my time trying to think about, should I be doing this task? As a business owner, like the most crucial thing that I have is I have like 8 hours in a day that I'm trying to work. And every one of those, I must be delivering value. So I'm constantly trying to think, should I do this task? Because I could be making more valuable decisions in that time. And I would just say that a lot of the task people in an organization, again, they've just been trained to come in and do those tasks. They've never really been rewarded or trained or encouraged to like think about those problems. But I'll just say on the flip side, I would find it hard to believe that if you're in an org and you bring somebody in that is bringing additional value to the organization by saying, hey, I saw that Mary and Joe and Jim have these same tasks as I do. Like, we should really talk about why those tasks exist. Maybe we can do something up front. And again, I completely understand that a lot of organizations, they really segregate the like people who should be thinking and the people who should be doing. And I know that it's hard sometimes in that organization to buck against the system. But I would encourage you, and even more so nowadays, you can go to your local friendly neighborhood LLM and say, hey, I'm in an organization that doesn't value this. Like, how should I approach this problem? And again, notice a how, like, don't just solve the problem. Like, how should I think about a problem like this? And how do I approach my boss and say, and again, you would be amazed as always when you talk to your, again, friendly neighborhood LLM. And the same thing would happen if you had access to cheap intelligence. You go to that Einstein in the phone and you say, like, how do I do this? And you would sit down and you'd be coached through the process. And this is why a lot of people do get like executive coaching and things like that. It's like, how do you go and think through these larger problems?
Yeah, I think that's so key. And that's what I focus on, with my clients. The first thing, they say, like, teach me how to use it. Like, what's the right way? And that's really like what that I have learned over the last 2 years engaging with CharmIQ, which is very different than my engagement with ChatGPT early days, right? Charm has really taught me to think, to be a thinker, to be a problem solver, and also to have that reward. It's so much more rewarding than just checking a box. I'm so glad I have transitioned from the box checker to the real thinker. And I was taught and trained to do that by engaging with my charms, with my agents, and they have names and they have personas, they even have genders within the platform, because it's not just like that Google approach, like, task this, asking a question. It's really working through things. And that's what I now teach my clients It's a relationship. You have this amazing artificial intelligence at your fingertips. Don't waste it. Don't waste the one question to Einstein about him clearing out your inbox. It's really educating yourself on the larger problem. And for me, it's always the opportunity. That's what I love most about it. Because at the end of the session, right, I always get an aha moment and kind of what the opportunity is. And then how do I approach it? How do I communicate it? And who am I communicating it to really reflects on my approach. And that's the beauty of charm, because you have all these different charms in there with all these different unique skills and background, and all of them know me to the core. So if you're at all eyes wide opening on this conversation, we've really revealed something that's been hiding in plain sight. And there's fundamentally different ways to approach problems. And AI, artificial intelligence, will amplify whichever your approach you're already using. So if you're just shouting orders at your chatbot, at your chat GPT, you're going to get those generic responses. So for everyone listening, here's my challenge. If you're using AI to automate tasks, you're leaving the real breakthroughs and the real money on the table. The most valuable question you can ask is, should this work even exist? Right? And so if you start there, you're not just faster, you're smarter. And that's where your real competitive edge comes from. So I challenge you all to really engage with whatever neighborhood LLM you're using in a different way. Really sort of change that behavior and look at the outcomes. So links to CharmIQ and previous conversations are below. And join us next time as we continue exploring how truly to harness AI's potential. Rob, thank you for showing us what intelligence actually looks like in practice. I definitely appreciate your brilliance and your guidance. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.